now then I'm going to work with some fantastic products here. Viva Decor, this is Pardo clay, this is Polymer Clay. Now it does say on the packet jewellery clay, but you can do far more than jewellery with it, of course. Polymer clay is one of those products that people see things made of it, they don't quite understand how it works, they're a little bit frightened of it, but there's some very clever techniques and items that you can make with polymer clay. Now I'll just very briefly explain what polymer clay is. It is a clay that has plasticizers in it. You do need to bake it, but you don't need any specialist equipment whatsoever. It just goes in your home oven. It's non-toxic. You bake at a very low temperature, and as I say, you can do some wonderful things with it. Now we're going to do something quite unusual. If you've never seen this before, I will say right now that when I start this demonstration and this tutorial, you'll probably think, what on earth is she doing? I really don't get this, and then it will all come together. So what I've started with is 4 different colours of clay. So I've taken an amount from each of the packets in amethyst, there's a red, there's a black, and this is actually translucent. Now it doesn't look clear at this point, there's a little bit of colour got into there, but that doesn't matter. But when that's baked, it will be quite translucent, so it gives a nice effect. Also the amethyst has got a little bit of a sheen to it, it's kind of got a pearly sort of finish to it. Now you can varnish the clays afterwards, you can add things into it to give decoration as well. But what we're going to do is work with the 4 colours individually, but then we're going to mix a kind of a blend in a very sort of clever way. Now this technique is called Makumi Gani, which is a very strange name. I don't know what it means. I've got to admit, I need to find that out actually. Now the other things I'm going to use are items that we will be featuring in our polymer clay shows, which are the blades. Now these obviously are sharp. You've got one that's a little bit more flexible than the other. This one's the firmer one. You can bend it, but it's not as flexible as the thinner one, which we call this a tissue blade. You also get one with kind of a serrated edge to it as well, which you can use for various different reasons. Now the other items I've got is a rolling pin. I've got various tools, and I've got some metal cutters as well. I've also got some gilding flakes. I'm going to bring at least one of those colours into this demonstration as well. Now one other tool that I really do like to use is a pasta machine, and it sounds strange, but it takes a lot of the work out of the clay, and the reason being, polymer clay, you need to condition it before you work with it. That means you need to warm it up, you need to make it pliable. So because I'm not using a pasta machine this time, I'm just going to use my hands, and to condition the clay, all I'm going to do is take a section of clay and roll it, twist it, roll it and twist it, and make it really pliable. Now I did work with this a little while before I began the filming, so it's already quite soft, but you can see, let me just take a section of that. What you're looking for is when you roll it out and you flex it, that there's no breakage, that you don't see cracks forming, that it's nice and pliable. You see, I can twist that around then, it's not cracking. Now older clay does go fairly dry, but you can bring it back. If you find you've got old clay that's very crumbly, you just need to work it more, you need to condition it more. So this is where a pasta machine comes in, because you can use that for conditioning the clay and also doing very clever techniques. So I'm just rolling each of these colours just to make sure that they feel as though they're flexible enough. As I say, I did pre-condition, so we're not doing too badly with these. I think we're good to go. Now I'm going to start with my first layer, which is this translucent, and the only reason I'm starting with that one is you can see there's already a little bit of colour in there. You can find with some of the clays you transfer some colour, there's a little bit of dye comes out of them onto your hands. It does wash off, you can just wash it off with soapy water, but if you don't want to mess up the colours, try and use the lighter ones first, or at least wash your hands in between. Because I can't keep nipping off to do that, I'm starting with this one. Now all I'm going to do first of all is roll out a layer. Now I'm not going to give you an exact size because it doesn't really matter at this point. If I was using a pasta machine, you've got different settings and you can alter the dial to create different widths. So I'm going to probably, I'd say that's about 2 millimeters, something like that. You can just see the size there. Okay, now no particular shape, I'm keeping it kind of rectangular without it being a real rectangle. I want it longer, a little bit longer one way than the other. Now I'm going to go with the red. I've got a little bit less of the red, but that's fine. Doesn't matter if they're not exact, because we can trim this down. We're going to change it considerably as well. Just going to pop that one there. Then I'm going to go with the amethyst colour. So we'll go with that next. Now, just as I'm rolling these out, what other things can you do with polymer clay? I like to make little characters. You can make wizards and fairies and Christmas ornaments and all sorts of different characters. Jewellery, you can make things like, you can cover glass jars, bits of pottery, mobile phone covers. You know, there's all sorts of ideas, lots of ideas, and lots of different interesting techniques as well. So I'm just going to go with the black now. Always work from a glass mat or a piece of marble or granite or something like that. You need a very smooth surface. Don't use a self-healing cutting mat that you'd use for card making, because the clay will just stick to it and make a mess. So I'm just rolling this one out a little bit more. And you'll notice as I'm rolling, I'm picking up the clay because it does have a tendency to stick to the surface a little bit. So if you just keep rolling and rolling, you might find that it's not so easy to pull it up. So I'm just going to put that black one to one side for a minute and bring back in the translucent piece. And I am just going to trim away the edges a little bit now, just to neaten it off. So I'm using one of the blades and I'm just going to pop that there. Then I'm going to bring in the red one. I'm going to sit that on top and trim that one down as well. Don't have to do it exact. It doesn't have to be perfectly even. So I'll just trim that down. Then I want to bring in the amethyst. Let's go that side with the amethyst. So we've now put the translucent in the centre. Trim that one as well. Now try not to mix up the colours that you're cutting off the edge here. You can reuse those. If you do mix colours together, you can end up with a grey or a brown, but you never ever throw away your clay. Everything has a use. So I'm just going to just roll those into a ball and pop them to one side, because they can be used for another project. Now what I'm going to do there, we've got a little sandwich now, a little sandwich of colours. What I'm going to do now is go for my black one, and before I sandwich that together, I'm going to use some gilding flakes. Now these are flakes. You can also use the sheets of gilding material as well. You can get gold, you can get silver, you can get bronze, copper, various different colours. Do you know, I might go with a bit of copper in this one as well. Now I'm not going to cover the whole surface, I'm just going to put flakes randomly across there. And you can see it is sticking to the surface of the clay. Don't have to use any glue whatsoever, it's just going to stick. Let's go for a little bit of the copper as well, just to add that sort of fiery colour in there. There we go. So you can see that there. I think the name of this is probably Japanese, but I'm not sure what the meaning is. Makumigani. It's a very strange name. I really should have found that out beforehand. Now then, I've got one or two little bits of gilding flake here, which I could clean away, but actually I'm not going to worry if it gets mixed in, or I can just try and sort of put that into position there. I'm going to pop this just on top and trim away. I'm going to keep that bit for later and trim down again so everything's more or less the same size. Now the black clay looks amazing with the gilding flakes as well, because it really shows the colours. Now the only thing you will notice here is if I just lift this up a little bit, because I've got the gilding flakes there, can you see how these aren't sticking together the same because that surface is covered? Don't worry about that, just hold it together, give it a little bit of a roll with your acrylic rolling pin on the top just to see if that's got a grip, and we'll go that way as well. Now that is now stuck to my glass mat. Okay, you can see I've got a bit of gilding flake on the top. I'm just going to pick those bits up, put them wherever, it doesn't matter. Now what I'm going to do now, this is where you're going to think, what on earth is she doing? This is very, very strange. I've got various tools here. I've got my blades, including my serrated blade. I've got a tin of metal cutters as well, all different shapes and sizes. We've got circles, squares, diamond in there, ovals, hearts, stars, all sorts of things. There's even a butterfly in there as well. I'm going to be using those. And then you can use things that maybe you find around the home. Now these are actually polymer clay tools, and it's kind of a pokey tool at one end and the other end is hollowed out. If I just push that into there, you'll be able to see it makes a little delve. Okay, now if you haven't got things like that, you can use things like the end of a paintbrush. So again, you can just poke into the clay. And I'm just randomly doing some shapes. or some patterns. No plan. Every time you do this, it's going to be different. Let's go for a round cutter. We'll pop that in there. I don't want to take that piece out. I want to leave it as it is. Let's go for a smaller version of the round cutter. We've got a tiny one here actually. Let's go for that, and let's go in there. Now that one's popped out, so what I'm going to do is push it out again and just pop it back in. Okay, it doesn't matter if I'm marking the clay. Let's go with another one there and pop that out as well. And actually, I am going to be a bit different. I'm going to turn that one upside down. Let's do that. There's no rules. Let's do another one here. Let's turn this one upside down as well. Okay, and then we'll go for, let's go for an oval. Let's do an oval there, just crossing over. Again, if it pops out, we'll just do that, put it back in, and we'll do one going the other way at the other side. Okay, isn't making much sense yet, is it? It's very, very strange. As I say, you can use things like your paintbrush ends, so maybe we'll put a few more little holes there. Just push those in. And perhaps we'll go for our serrated blade as well. Let's put a few of those in, just working our way through. Okay. Now you've noticed I've put all sorts of markings into the clay there, but I've not taken away any sections. What I'm going to do now is just squash that back in a little bit. We're just going to bring the edges in. I'm using one of my blades to lift that from the mat because it has been stuck down, and I'm just going to squash that in a little bit more. I'm closing off those holes a little bit as well that I've made where I've done the indentations. I don't really want open holes, but I'm just gradually pulling this in from the sides. So we're making it a little bit thicker, but it's not quite as wide. Okay, so it's looking very strange still. Just going over the top with my rolling pin a little bit, turn that round. Again, I can just continue to squash that in a little bit. And then we'll go over the top again, just to make that top surface a little bit flatter. Now this is the interesting bit. I told you, didn't I, you'd think, what on earth is she doing? I'm pressing that back down onto the glass mat, and I'm going to go for my thinner blade. This is the one that's more flexible. Obviously, it has got a sharp edge. You can just see that at the bottom there. You can see which is the sharp edge. Now, I need to make sure this is stuck down to the glass because I want both hands for the blade. And all I'm going to do now is working from the back, and very carefully I'm going to slice into the clay, and I'm going to start very gradually, just taking thin slithers. So we're just going under the surface there, just working through, and each time you take a slither, have a look at it, and you'll start to see patterns emerging. Now we've only taken two very thin layers off at the middle. Now the trick is try and keep it fairly even. So there I can see I took more off at the front than the back. So I'm going to just try and sort of go in a little bit deeper at the back there and slice there. And I'm going to keep going, and I'm keeping all these bits and pieces. Now what's happening is I'm starting to reveal patterns coming through. Because we used all those tools in different ways and moved the clay around, rather than having a sandwich of the different colours and the different layers, we're going to see them coming through in patterns. And the more you go through, the more it's going to change. Now we're seeing much more the translucent now, much more, but we're going to see the other colours coming through as well. So there you can see some of the amethyst. Now the important thing is, if you see a piece that you slice off and you really like the look of the pattern, make sure you keep it. If there's anything that you really don't want to use, then you can roll it up and use it again. Now I'm just going to move that little bit and stick that bit back down. Just go back into the top there, and you can see the colours starting to come through more in the centre. And we're picking up, now look, we've got a slice of black coming through there. Just going to go again. And there's some interesting little designs coming through. I can see the areas where maybe I've used the end of the paintbrush there and pushed the colours down. We can see the copper coming through. we can see various different colours. And look at both sides as well. Don't just look at one side, look at the other. Can you see how different they are? Completely different. Now these are obviously the two circles that I cut out and switched them over. So we've got kind of that pattern going on there. So we've got lots of different designs. You can go very, very thinly with your clay. But what do you do with it when you've done that? Well, there's lots of things you can do with it. I'm just going to grab a little bit more of the clay. These are the packs of clay as they come. Let me just get a bit more of the amethyst. I'm going to condition this. So straight from the pack. It needs a little bit of work. It needs to be softened up. Because this is quite fresh stock, then it's not going to take too much work. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to roll this out. And I'd want again about 2 millimetres in thickness. And then I'm going to pick some areas of the slices that I've done that I find quite interesting. And I'm looking, let's have a look what we've got here. I quite like this one. Can you see there we've got the red coming through? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my circle cutter and take that section out. And I'm thinking, do you know that there's not a lot of black in there, there's not a lot of the gilding flakes coming through. Shall we go with maybe a bit of this here? So what I'm going to do there is take another slice. I'm going to lay that over the top now. So I can change things as I go along. Now obviously because I've done that, I've got two different levels. So what I'm going to do is just press down a little bit and flatten again. So that now becomes one smooth surface. I'm trying not to distort the pattern too much. Again, I can cut there so I can see my circle. And I'm still not happy. I think, no, I still want to change that. I'm going to do something different with it. Let's take that up. Still haven't got much of that gilding flake. So what about if let's take this section here. Now then, where shall I put it? Shall I put it there? Shall I put it there? I'm going to take a bit of that off. And again, there you can see now I've got completely different thicknesses. So I'm just going to press down with the rolling pin a little bit, and then I'm going to just flatten that off again. So we're losing that seam. What you're really looking for is a nice even piece. And then I'm going to cut that out again, and I'm just waiting until I find something that I really like. And I can see that's still a little bit uneven, so again I'm just going to thicken that up. Let's just pop that under there. I quite like the look of that now. I've got some of the gilding going through there. I've got a nice design, but I'm still going to change it. So what I'm going to do now, and I did this previously, and there will be more tutorials to come. I've got a little cane that I've created a leaf pattern in. Can you just see that there? Now that's got a little bit squashed and battered in my box, but I'm not going to worry about that. I'm using my flexible blade again, and I'm not going to mess up any of those slices at the minute. I'm going to use those. But I'm going to take my blade and just cut one or two very thin little pieces from my leaf cane. Just nice and fine. Not sure how many I'm going to use, so I'll cut one or two off. And then I think what we'll do, we'll have those going up through the centre, or maybe more to one side, just in a bit of a pattern. So a random pattern going up through the centre of that disc there. That looks quite nice, I'm quite happy with that. So again, I'm just going to take my rolling pin. I don't want to just roll over the top because I will just distort everything. Let's just press down on the surface, and then lightly I'm going to just roll that. So now everything is blending together. And then once again, let's take the disc. We'll cut that out. Remove the excess there. And this, I think I'm going to hang onto a piece of leather cord. So I'll need to cut or add some sort of jewellery finding. But I think what I'm going to do is just go with another circle cutter. And let's take this out. Now we're not building up the layers now, so we're going to take this right away. And there you can see you've got your disc. And to remove that from the glass mat, I've just got to make sure I try and lift this with the blade without distorting the shape too much. Now all you'd need to do there is pop that onto a baking tray and bake in an oven for about half an hour. I'm going to turn this around. Let me put it onto the tin lid and then you can probably see it a little bit more easily. So you can see the design. Now when that's baked, you could varnish it or you could buff it up and you can bring a really nice sheen and shine to the top. Every time you do this technique, you will get completely different patterns and designs. You'll get the colours you use, the type of clay you use, whether it's a metallic, whether you add things into there, you can put glitter into it as well. You can use alcohol inks to colour the clay. There's all sorts of different ways of working with it. What you can also do, if you've got, I'm not going to do the whole thing, but if you've got a sheet of clay, roll it out very, very thinly. If you buy one of those clear phone covers or something like that, or use a tin or a glass jar, the lid on a glass jar, I'm just using this tin lid. If you were to coat the whole thing, and you wouldn't put this straight onto the lid, you would do this on the flat surface first. But I'm just going to show you how you can then layer up all your different slices. And I really want to pick out some of that gilding and some of the black and get that going in here as well. So you're creating, again, another pattern, another design. Doesn't matter the different thicknesses because you can roll them flat. This is again where a pasta machine would come in, because if you had a pasta machine, what you would do, just lightly press down with the rolling pin first and then put it through one of the settings on the pasta machine and you'll get a really nice even finish. But I'm just going to roll with a rolling pin there, just to get that surface. You don't want to see the joins, you want to see it as one continuous piece. Let's just neaten the edges off of that, just so it looks a bit tidier. And once again, use things like your canes if you've made patterns in your polymer clay canes. If you haven't seen a tutorial for the canes yet, do look out for that. I'm sure we're going to be showing you how to do different canes. It's kind of, the process is like building a stick of rock, where you build a pattern, or you can put letters in it if you want. You build a pattern and you make quite a chunky piece of clay, usually in a sort of a circular shape, and then you reduce the size down, and what happens is you keep the pattern that runs through the cane, but when you slice them you've got miniature versions. So this was created to look like a leaf, just using black clay. This was actually made with offcuts, just scrap pieces that are mixed together rather than fresh pieces. But I often do like to add, let's go again with the leaf, just going up that side there. Let's do a little bit of a design on that plainer edge. So you could make flower petals, you could do lettering, you could do whatever you wanted to do. You can make animal skin sort of designs as well, that would look really effective. Some very clever artists I've seen have made real scenes inside the canes. So I've seen Halloween scenes where you've got trees and little tombstones and even a black cat. But it's in such a miniature version, it's just incredible to see it. So again there, we've just got to make sure, without distorting things, I'm working that into the clay so we're losing those joins. And at any point you can just trim off or cut with cutters or work around a glass jar. As I say, I like to decorate lids and things like that of jars, but you can create some wonderful designs with many different techniques for blending and create some beautiful items. That's just one very simple way that everybody could work with the clay. It's great stuff, it's very addictive as well. So thank you for joining me. I hope you've learnt something there. Do watch out for some more tutorials. Thank you very much.